Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So today's video is part 2 of my extended conversation with Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. Today we take on the obscenity of gun violence in America and what we can do about it. We talk about some new proposed legislation to help homicide families that lost a loved one to violent crime. We talk about whether accountability is really on the horizon for Donald Trump and his criminal associates. And then we finish up by talking a little bit about our kids. And I ask Congressman Swalwell whether he'd like to see his children follow in his footsteps and make their way into politics. I hope you enjoy this second part of my extended conversation with Congressman Eric Swalwell. Something very near and dear to my heart. It's a piece of legislation that you sponsored. I think the co-sponsor was Representative McCall from Texas, and it is the Homicide Families Victims' Rights Act. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, you're downplaying your role because it was inspired by you reaching out to me and telling me in your experience as a former homicide prosecutor that too often when cases go cold, families have homicide victims' families have no recourse, to have the cases opened up. So for federal cases, essentially, it creates a path for families to see their cases reopened and have them looked at after a certain period of time passes. And that's because, as you know, we evolve in our evidentiary, collection techniques. That the methods that were used, when I was born in 1980, have certainly advanced, certainly as it relates to DNA and technical surveillance capabilities, facial recognition, video analytics. So much more evidence is available for law enforcement that I think every family who has an unsolved homicide case is worthy of having it reopened if it could find the true killer.
Well, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for authoring it, for sponsoring it. I hope it passes. And
it's bipartisan, Glenn, right? We have a Republican, former U.S. Attorney Mike McCall from Texas, who introduced it, and it's my top priority on the Judiciary Committee right now, as far as bills that I think could get passed in a bipartisan way. I'm working on gun violence bills. We know that those sadly tend to be partisan, but if we're looking for bipartisan wins, I do believe this one could get a vote very soon.
Yeah, and your extraordinary work on behalf of combating gun violence is a nice segue because, we have more than 250,000 unsolved homicide cases in our country. That's 250,000 families who sit by the phone every day waiting for a detective or an investigator or an agent to call and say, we've got a break in your son's case, your spouse's case, your partner's case. And those calls never come. And that's why I think the the Homicide Families Victims' Rights Act is so important. But when we're talking about gun violence generally, I know I have gotten to know Fred Gutenberg. I know you know him well, and he is on such an important mission. But where are we on things like banning assault rifles, which only makes complete common sense to this old prosecutor?
We're not where we need to be, just to be frank, and I do appreciate that over the weekend, many of the gun violence prevention organizations are calling on President Biden to do more, to see, David Chipman, confirmed as, the director of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, to just do more to make sure that we can get background checks passed, in the Senate, and that we can get the assault weapons ban passed, in the House and the Senate. My personal timeline on this with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old and one on the way is that when my kids go to middle school, they will ask me if it's true that middle schoolers in generations before them had to do gun violence drills. And I want that to be so foreign to them because they don't have to do it, and they'll be so perplexed as to why we would have allowed that to happen. And that will only happen if we do say enough is enough and take the most dangerous weapons from the most dangerous people. And Glenn, I want you to know, I'm the son of a cop. My brothers are cops. I like to shoot. I think if you are a law-abiding individual, go shoot for sport at the range. Take your kids duck hunting. Have a shotgun or a pistol in your home if that makes you feel safe. When an intruder comes in. But we can also be a country that says you don't need a military-style assault rifle to protect yourself or to hunt, or that if you're a felon or someone who's had a history of mental illness, that you should not be allowed to have a firearm. I think we can do all of that. I think we can be sophisticated enough to have some restrictions in place so that the most dangerous people don't have the most dangerous weapons.
And you say you're the son of a cop. I read with great interest the story about your dad, who ultimately lost his job as the chief of police because he was determined to do the right thing, even if it came with political risk, like enforcing parking tickets, for goodness sakes. And that kind of is the theme throughout your book, Endgame. It is having the courage to do what's right, even at significant risk to yourself, not just your job, but your own safety when it comes to people like Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, Colonel Vindman, Fiona Hill. And, that is something that it seems like is sorely lacking in some political quarters these days.
Glenn, the book in part was a tribute to my dad, who lost his job for standing up to small town corruption. And while history will not know his name, he did inspire, his son to believe that no one is above the law, not even the president of the United States. And I do think history will know the names of people like Ambassador Yovanovitch, Fiona Hill, Colonel Alexander Vindman, and even recent names like Michael Fanone of the Metropolitan Police Department, or Harry Dunn of the Capitol Police Department, or Daniel Hodges, or Sergeant Ganell, people that testified in that select committee hearing, who represent the hundreds of officers who are not known but still showed up that day. Or, Miles Taylor, who was at the Department of Homeland Security and wrote the op-ed in the book Anonymous, and then finally, unmasked himself because he thought too much was on the line, and has suffered reputational damage because of it. These are the times where, we look to who's willing to risk it all to save the country. And I think that's who history is going to remember. And we just have to make sure that it's a country and a democracy that allows truth to be history.
Two final questions. First, we have got, and your book tends to pull together so many threads and so many episodes, sad episodes, that we tend to forget how it's really dramatic when it's all sort of put together in one narrative. So we went from, hey, Russia, if you're listening, to I need a favor, though, to stop the steal, to I'm going to be reinstated as president. Do you, and 1,000 ugly episodes in between, do you think accountability will come to Donald Trump and his criminal associates?
I do, because I'm like you. I'm an optimist. I think the good guys always win at the end. I think every case I've put before a jury, I was confident that 12 ordinary people, with the right evidence, will always make the right decision. And I think here it's not 12 ordinary people. It's 350 million Americans. But I believe we have to just make sure that Americans know what's at stake, who we are, what matters. And it's funny. I think of everything you just laid out about Donald Trump, right? It's like all the arrows point in the same direction, right? There's not a countervailing arrow pointing toward him being good and innocent. All the arrows point towards someone who is not what we imagine a leader of the United States being. He's corrupt. He's a bully. He lies. I mean, he's everything that we would never want, to read about in the history books about an American leader. And so that's why, I really posit in the book that this is Trumpism versus democracy, and only one of them is going to win. And we have to do all we can to make sure that this democracy lives on, and we learn, most importantly, from what he's exposed, to make sure that no one as dangerous as him ever comes along again.
Okay, last question on a personal front. So I have often said over the years, half jokingly, that one of my proudest accomplishments is that none of my 5 daughters went to law school. So how would you feel about Nelson and Catherine Cricket, as you call her, your son and your daughter, if they grew up and they went into politics? Is that something you would encourage, discourage, or just kind of let them make their own decisions?
I mean, the honest answer is I hope I've done enough of the politics for a couple generations in the family. It's kind of like, how many years have you lived this week? Every week in the time that I've served. I went into public service because of my dad, right? He was a cop. He'd never gone to college. He always admired the prosecutors in the courtroom and told me that he wanted me to have an opportunity he didn't have, which was to go to college, get a law school education, and then be a prosecutor. And I followed that. And so I hope whatever my kids do, they serve the public, above themselves, and that the lesson that my dad taught me, and I hope I teach them, is a simple one, which is doing the right thing is always the most important thing. And no one is above the law. And I hope that is imparted upon them in however they serve. But yeah, I would be happy if I was the last Swalwell ever on a ballot.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think we teach our children a lot and we don't even know we're teaching them. My oldest daughter, who just had our first grandchild, once said to me in recent years, and she's in her 30s, she said, "Well, Dad, you always taught us that money was bad." And I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah, because you said public service is really what's most important." I said, "Yeah, but those two things don't necessarily go hand in hand, but you try to teach them something and they take away other lessons." But
that's right.
But let me just say, I know you have to go. I want to thank you on behalf of, I hope it doesn't sound corny, the country, and certainly the Team Justice folks that I work with every day. We're all grassroots. We're all just out there fighting the good fight on an all-volunteer basis every day, trying to beat back what we've experienced over the last 4+ years. I think people are thirsty for accountability. They're thirsty for justice, and I think the nation appreciates having somebody like you who is just going after it tirelessly, aggressively every day. We all very much appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Glenn, as I said, for being a voice during these times. And, I'm a Democrat. I ran, very much in the great big center when I knocked off another Democrat in Congress. I think my skills, as a prosecutor, helped me when Donald Trump was elected. And it wasn't because I was a Democrat trying to take down a Republican. It's because I was using what I learned in the courtroom of just putting circumstantial evidence together to show that this guy was just not who we needed a president to be. And I think you're doing the same thing every day, which is just piecing the facts together and making sure that your viewers and listeners understand that not only is what he has done wrong, not only is that wrong, but that we can and should, expect much, much better from those who lead us.
Well, thank you, Congressman Swalwell, and please keep punching on our behalf.
Will do. Thank you, Glenn.
So, friends, thanks for watching part 2 of my extended conversation with Congressman Eric Swalwell. I intend to do more of these conversations and would love to hear from you who you would like me to sit down and talk with for a half an hour or so. As always, folks, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.